At 4ZZZ, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we broadcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people. We acknowledge that their sovereignty over this land was never ceded.
And we stand in solidarity with them.
You're listening to Tranzmission on 4ZZZ, amplifying the trans and gender non-conforming voices of Brisbane and beyond.
Good morning, Meanjin. You're listening to Tranzmission on 4ZZZ. Tranzmission, all about amplifying the voices of the trans community here in Meanjin and around all other places, really, generally. My name is Ez. I use he, him pronouns.
My name is Bette. I use she, they pronouns.
And, we're hanging out in studio today, bringing you some updates on, some community events coming up. But mostly, our focus, our laser beam focus, will be on SEGM, who, if you don't know who SEGM are, that's okay. We're going to fill you in on all the details. But essentially, SEGM is Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which is a not-for-profit organisation known for targeting or being opposing to gender-affirming care, particularly for trans youth. So we will be laser beaming them today in our focus and discussion. Trigger language, content, trigger warning for the episode. We'll probably get a bit heavy, so just letting you know, dear listener, if you are feeling particularly vulnerable or sensitive to this news today, maybe listen back another time if you need to. But to begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which 4ZZZ broadcasts, which is the Turrbal and Yuggera people. We know that this land is stolen, and we continue to broadcast honouring the traditional owners of the land that we're on. I'd like to extend our love and care and acknowledgement to all Indigenous and First Nations people living on this land that we're currently broadcasting, and to all those suffering around the world, fighting the good fight for land back. We stand with you. 4ZZZ stands with you. Tranzmission stands with you, and so do I personally as well. So, what else are we doing today? We're also going to be talking a little bit about some events. So there's an event coming up. It's actually not until May. But it's really worth mentioning because it looks really fantastic. I mentioned it before. It's at Vinnie's Dive Bar, which is at 44A Nerang Street in Southport, so down the coast. On May 9th from 6 p.m. It is a Project 491 fundraiser, which is an initiative led by Ozpath in response to the Queensland Government's unacceptable restrictions of gender-affirming care for trans and gender-diverse young people. You can head to ozpath.org.au to donate to their Project 491 if you'd like to directly, or you could come to this gig, 491 Fest at Vinnie's Dive. It's got Permanent Revolution, Queerbait, Lucas Chiachowski, and Flanger Panties, as well as the one and only Salma Soul. So if you want to get down to that, May 9th, 6 p.m, it's 18 plus tickets on the door, so it's $18 online or $23 on the door. All the funds going to Project 491. Yeah, which is great. You should head on down to that. Also some other things, Bet.
We've got a little community announcement on behalf of a local organisation that do good work called the Church of Snootology. Now, they're partially behind this gig. I'm not sure who else helped out, but I know that Sophie from the Church of Snootology is very passionate about the 491 and had something at least to do with starting this gig.
Yeah.
I think it was her idea. So we've got a little community announcement about Snooty the Manitou, who escaped from the San Diego Zoo and started this cult.
It's group. A group called Church of Snootology. Here's a little thing for y'all this morning.
From the calm waters of the Temple of Snootology, Snooty shares the message that everyone deserves to swim free, trans rights are human rights, and in Snooty's waters all are welcome. May Snooty swim forever in your heart. Authorised by the Temple of Snootology, Brisbane.
We all deserve to swim free.
Forever.
It's true. Forever. Swim free, dear listener.
And look out for the Church of Snootology spreading their gospel at your next trans event. They'll be hanging around in the crowd and probably, trying to bash your ear about Snooty.
Yeah. Sounds really get bashed by Snoot. So next trans rally, look out for the Snooty crew. They'll be around.
They're keeping people safe.
That's it.
That is one of their prerogatives.
Which is the main thing. And they'll also most likely be at Vinny's Dive on May 9th for that
certainly. Incredible
fundraiser. So, yeah, head to that. I'll be carpooling with a bunch of other transqueers. We'll be, like, snooting down the coast at full speed.
I'll be riding the manatee.
That's it. Amplifying the voices of the trans and gender non-conforming community of Meanjin, Brisbane and beyond.
Transmission on 4ZZZ brings you the latest in trans community news, music and events.
Every Tuesday from 9am till 10am.
Join our team of hosts for an hour of celebrating the unique perspectives of the trans community.
Transmission, Tuesday mornings from 9am till 10am on 4ZZZ. You're listening to Transmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez. I use he, him pronouns.
My name is Bette. I use she, they pronouns.
And we've had some text in from someone asking for a song request. Unfortunately, you're a non-sub. That is how your name comes up when you are a non-subscriber to 4ZZZ. So if you'd like to make a song request, you can subscribe, first of all, to 4ZZZ by heading to 4ZZZ.org.au/support. It is also AprilAtonement, which means you've got loads of opportunities to win prizes. So many damn good ones indeed. It also means once you're subscribed, you can text in and song requests may be added to the list of long requests that we have in the studio. During the hour of transmission power, of course, though, it is exclusively music by trans and gender diverse artists only. So if you do have a song request, I do ask that you are aware of the communities that the artist is part of, or that band, and then we can play it for you, or we can be sent over to the show after, and they may also cue it up for you. So, yeah. But apart from that, we're about to dive into some hardcore understanding of things. Bet, we're talking about SEGM, we're talking about anti-trans groups.
Yeah, I can't promise hardcore understanding. I have all these browser links open on my computer about SEGM, and I'm just, like, it just makes my head spin. So, I've done my best. My brain is full.
Let it out. Let it out, Bet.
Well, the first thing I want to make clear is that there's a connection between SEGM and the Cass Review, and there's a direct connection between the Cass Review and what's going on in Queensland at the moment. And there may well be, although I can't prove it, a direct connection between SEGM and what's going on in Queensland at the moment with the banning of stage 1 and 2 hormones for young people. So, in my opinion, SEGM at best influenced and at worst authored the Cass Review. They definitely were involved, and we have proof of that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first I thought we'd just have a quick look at who SEGM are. So there are a handful of anti-trans physicians pretending to spearhead a movement. There's a great article by the Southern Poverty Law Centre, a famous law firm and civil rights advocacy organisation from the United States. They've designated SEGM a hate group. I'm going to link to the article in the show notes for the podcast listeners. And they refer to SEGM as the hub of the anti-LGBTQ plus pseudoscience network. And this network is what we would, from what they've uncovered, firstly, overlapping membership of different organisations in this so-called network. It looks like what we call an astroturfing event, like an astroturfing attempt, which is like an effort to recreate the appearance of a grassroots movement of concerned citizens, or in this case, concerned physicians. So we don't know where SEGM's funding comes from. The SPLC tracked their funding, and it's mostly anonymous donations, some very large ones, like there was one of $100,000. There were other crowdfunding donations of $20,000 here or there. So obviously there's some rich people or organisations supporting these groups, and especially SEGM. SEGM had donations of $800,000 in 1 year. I think that was 2020. And the members of SEGM serve on the boards of countless other anti-trans organisations, and most of these organisations seem to only exist as websites. They don't have any locations, head offices, anything like that. one anti-trans physician. Her name is Stella O'Malley. She runs Genspect.
I was about to say, I know that name.
Yeah, so she's probably the most infamous of all of these people, I'd say. She's a big self-promoter, and she serves on the board of, at last count, something like 9 of these organisations. And in fact, she's the president of several of them. I couldn't find the link that told me how many, which sort of tells you, I mean, because also she runs her own psychology clinic and supposedly sees patients. So, I mean, how much time does she really have to put into each of these organisations that she's supposedly the president of? They really seem to exist in name only.
Interesting. And Genspect, which is the organisation that she founded, that's a gender-critical group as well. So basically saying doesn't like conversion therapy for lesbian and gays, but is open to conversion therapy for trans people. Yeah,
so I kind of think of Stella O'Malley and Genspect as kind of like the bad cop to SEGM's good cop.
Okay.
And Roberto D'Angelo as being the leader of SEGM. He's like the good cop. So he's very professional. He's always wearing a suit. He's very soft-spoken. He's not a big self-promoter. In fact, he's very reclusive, and he hides away.
And he's in Australia, isn't he? Yeah.
He's 2 hours' drive from us in the Byron Bay hinterland. So he hides away there in a little town in the hinterland. He rarely does press of his own, and when he does, it's usually to address psychiatrists at conventions or a SEGM convention or things like that. Whereas Stella O'Malley has her own YouTube channel. She's very public, and she says some outrageous things. He never says outrageous things. He's very clever like that.
Yeah, it's conservative.
But I kind of think this is a very clever two-pronged approach they've got going here, because Stella O'Malley says all the kind of beyond the pale stuff. She talks about things like autogynephilia still, and she acts as if so-called, what do they call it again? Rapid onset gender dysphoria is a real diagnosis. And this is hilarious. Genspect actually host World ROGD Day. So they have this day devoted to so-called rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is not recognised as a diagnosis by any major medical organisation. But Stella O'Malley doesn't care. She'll get on YouTube and her podcast. She's got a podcast with many listeners. She's a very busy woman. And she'll talk about this stuff as if it's just established scientific fact. Whereas SEGM and Roberto D'Angelo, they will only ever talk about the theory of rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Right, so they're a bit more careful with how they word things.
Yeah, they're aiming for more credibility. I think Genspect are aiming to kind of stir up the masses.
Right.
So, for instance, like the head of Genspect in Australia is a woman. I forget what she does. She's a real estate agent or something. She's not a medical practitioner at all.
We love real estate agents on 4ZZZ.
That may be. I can't remember exactly what she is, but or she owns a vineyard or something. I can't remember. But she's not a physician, right? She's just the mother of a trans kid or a gender diverse kid that she didn't support.
Right.
And she got all riled up about it. And now she's the head of Genspect in Australia. That's how much credibility they have.
Right.
SEGM, at least it's run by actual physicians, right? And
again, physicians don't always know what they're talking about either.
Yeah, but I mean, and I say at least, which I mean, look, they're far more dangerous, I guess is my point. SEGM are, in my opinion, the most dangerous anti-trans organisation in the world in the Western world that I know of. Genspect are more like the clowns, in my opinion. I mean, Stella O'Malley is like a buffoon that goes around dancing and singing and drawing attention to this stuff. Kind of like, J.K. Rowling. And you could probably rate all these people on a scale, with Rowling and, Posey Parker and people like that at one end being the extremists, and Roberto D'Angelo, who, by the way, is queer. He's gay. And he claims that when he was young, if gender-affirming medical care had been a thing back then, that he would have, quote-unquote, been transitioned because he was so feminine and he wanted to be a woman, apparently. I mean, so he says. But the funny thing is, Stella O'Malley says exactly the same thing. She says when she was young, she was this tomboy and she wanted to be a boy, and if gender-affirming medical care had been around in her day, she would have, quote-unquote, been transitioned. It's...
Wow.
It boggles my mind.
I will
narrative.
let them rest with their own self-qualms about that. They're obviously wrestling with it in a very public way. So that's
totally.
On them.
How many genders are there?
I don't know. I just got here.
We were just chatting about
SEGM.
SEGM, yeah.
And the whole anti-trans disinformation network.
That's it. And we are now going to give you information on their disinformation.
So, a bit of history. It seems like most of the main connections between this fairly small cast of characters, I'd say 20 to 30 physicians who are kind of in charge of all of these organisations. I have not tried to count the organisations, but it must be around 20 at least. It seems like most of these physicians met in the late 2010s via something called the Pediatric and Adolescent Gender Dysphoria Working Group, which was sometimes just called the GD Working Group. Now, the membership of that group included some infamous names, some old school names like Kenneth Zucker, who I've mentioned here before. He ran the Toronto CAMH Gender Clinic, where he openly did conversion therapy on trans kids. We spoke about it in the episode on conversion therapy. He's still around. He also did help some kids transition. If they made it through the gauntlet and they just wouldn't back down, then he would help them. But it was a last resort.
Wow.
His stated aim was to reduce
What a
the
wonderful
number of
approach.
transsexuals in the world. So Kenneth Zucker is a huge influence on SEGM and all of these groups. They quote his studies, even though those studies are very outdated. They stem from a time before a diagnosis of gender dysphoria actually existed. And they're not only are they not relevant to the questions that we're asking today, or that SEGM are asking today, like how many trans kids, quote unquote, detransition, they're not relevant to that because these kids weren't all trans. That's not what Zucker was looking for, whether kids were trans. He was just trying to stop little boys, quote unquote, from being feminine. And they're also not helpful because he was running a conversion therapy clinic, so obviously a high number of those kids, quote unquote, detransition because he pushed them into it. But anyway, the other person who was included in this group was Ray Blanchard, the inventor of autogynephilia theory. He's still around as well, and he gets quoted. Stella O'Malley, like I said, is always talking about autogynephilia, as are most of the TERFs. Blanchard's still around. He's on Twitter tweeting hate-filled rants. There's Michael Bailey. He was basically an offsider of Blanchard. Susan Bradley, she's a trans woman who was an offsider of Zucker. I don't know a lot about her, but I'm not very impressed with her stance. And then there's this guy, James Cantor, who wanted to put the P in LGBTQ, P being for pedophilia. He thought of it as a legitimate
people,
sexual orientation. So all of these people were influential, quite obviously, on the cast of characters that became SEGM and Genspect. They all met at this time in about 2018. And the first thing they did in this GD working group was to promote Lisa Littman's study into ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria, which has since been called pseudoscientific by just about everyone who has a reasonable stance on this. It's not recognised, as I said, as a diagnosis, but they have been championing it ever since for the last 7 years. A little quote from Yale University, who did a study on SEGM in 2022. SEGM lists as clinical and academic advisors a group of only 14 people, many of whom have limited or no scientific qualifications related to the study of medical treatment for transgender people. None have published original empirical research on the medical treatment of transgender people in a peer-reviewed publication, and none currently treat patients in a recognised gender clinic. SEGM has a total of 39 relevant publications, this was in 2022, and 75% of these are letters to the editor, which also are not peer-reviewed. So those stats have changed since 2022. But SEGM still specialises in letters to the editor, as well as opinion pieces. If you go to their research page, almost every piece on there they list on there by one of their members or someone is affiliated with them is basically an opinion piece. It is peer-reviewed, mostly by people from within the
So it's the same 14
Pseudoscience
people.
Network. Yeah, reviewing each other's papers. And all of these papers are just opinions. They're not studies, they're not original research, or else they're reviews. They're not systematic reviews, they're reviews of other people's research where they put their own spin on it.
This must be the most annoying WhatsApp group to be a part of.
Oh my God. Looking at their website makes you want to die. Like it goes on and on.
Don't give them the views.
It goes on and on. It is so in-depth, and they go right into this stuff with all of this justification. It makes your head spin. But I just wanted to point out one way that these organizations operate is through citation laundering. So citation laundering is when a physician will make a claim unsupported by evidence in one of these opinion pieces. So the physician might say A might be associated with B, and then another physician cites that paper but removes the uncertainty, saying A is associated with B. And then the process is repeated maybe a few times until the statement becomes A causes B.
Right.
But at that point, the chain of links is too long for anyone to be bothered following it.
Except for Bette.
Well, yeah, I followed a few of them. One example of this I saw was where Roberto D'Angelo was on a video promoting Therapy First, which I think of as kind of another wing of SEGM. It's obviously Roberto D'Angelo's baby. It's basically seems to be a registry of a lot of gender-critical so-called physicians, mostly psychologists and some psychiatrists. So D'Angelo wrote the clinical guidelines, which we spoke about in the episode on conversion therapy. So he's in a video on YouTube addressing basically promoting Therapy First for other physicians. And he says, we at Therapy First have been very influenced by SEGM, as if SEGM's an entirely different organization and they just picked up some knowledge from there. But he's actually the president of SEGM when he's saying this. So this is a good example. It reminds me of when I was young and I used to have a lot of musical side projects, and I'd pretend that they were different people, and then I would have like a website or a Bandcamp page where they would feud with each other or they would say things about each other, these different projects. It's like he's created this kind of web of fictional organizations that all relate to each other and say, we're very influenced by this other organization.
This is actually very clever, though, when you think about it, because
clever.
You do this, and for people who are like scared parents who maybe their kids have just come out or disclosed that they might be questioning their gender, and then a parent goes, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Goes on the internet, finds even just one of these organizations, and they're backing each other, and it's a very convoluted, believable web of quote-unquote evidence and support for these theories and these ideas. So then it's very easy for parents to go, what needs to be happening is conversion therapy for my kid. What needs to be happening is preventing them accessing any of these mainstream support networks or organizations or medical support. So, it can be very, you're being bombarded with essentially a group of just 14 people making out that they're actually like hundreds of people. They're not. It's like 3 kids standing on top of each other wearing a trench coat. That's what SEGM is. That's what all of the cast review, all of this is built on an illusion that there's actually like a lot of people backing this, when it's just a few really confused, probably internalized transphobic, people.
Very loud people.
Very loud people, yeah.
I did want to say now one thing that SEGM and Hilary Cass, who wrote the cast review, have in common is they're like, no, we don't support conversion therapy. And nowhere will they say, look, what you should do is give your kid conversion therapy. But then they all come out against bans on conversion therapy. They claim that those bans would have a chilling effect on therapists, and that therapists wouldn't be able to just explore a child's gender. Hilary Cass herself has said this.
But they ask such disturbing and creepy questions to children in those processes.
Well,
though,
I know, and like I said in the episode on conversion therapy, they want the Therapy First recommend 40 hours of therapy before a young person can access gender-affirming medical care.
And they're not calling it conversion therapy. What they're calling it is exploratory therapy.
Yeah, well, look, I wanted to point out something clever about that too, which is that when these people started out, they created this organisation called the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association. They changed that branding because gender exploratory therapy became associated with conversion therapy. And so now they've changed it to therapy first, and instead of talking always about gender exploratory therapy, they just talk about psychotherapy. And they draw this false dichotomy, which Hilary Cass does in the Cass Review too, and this comes straight from the SEGM playbook and the Family First playbook. They draw a false dichotomy between gender-affirming care, which includes therapy and includes exploration, but they pretend like it doesn't include exploration, and they claim that, you know, gender-affirming care is just a medical pathway, and they're the only ones promoting psychotherapy for gender dysphoria. Well, even the Australian Standards of Care says explicitly that exploration may be needed. But in other cases, if a child is happy, parents are supportive, and that child wants and appears to need to transition, then you don't need to subject them to therapy.
No.
That's the only real difference. SEGM are mandating that every child that displays gender dysphoria or gender incongruence should be put through what I would see as a gauntlet of therapy. And whether that therapy is conversion therapy or not, in my mind, that's just semantics. It's a horrible experience by the sound of it for those children that is going to have the effect, in most cases, of discouraging them and surrounding their gender identity with shame because of the invasive, horrible questions that SEGM and Therapy First recommend that therapists grill these kids with for 40 hours.
Yeah, and they're like kids, they're young, they're children most of the time, you know, which is horrendous. It's horrendous.
It's horrifying. Well, we're out of time. Just briefly, and I said this before, we know that at least 2 members of SEGM were on the clinical expert group that advised Hilary Cass. I will put the evidence in the show notes. We don't know who else was on that board, except for Riitakatu Kaltiala, the Finnish psychiatrist who basically says the same stuff that SEGM does and has spoken at SEGM events, whether she's a member of SEGM or not. So we don't know who the professionals were that advised Hilary Cass and helped to write the Cass Review. We only know about 3 of them, and all of them were associated with SEGM.
Wow. There you go. You're listening to Tranzmission on 4ZZZ. My name is Ez. I use he, him pronouns.
My name is Bette. I use she, they pronouns.
And why do you do what you do, Bette?
Well, in this case, I feel like I've discussed this with some other trans advocates. I feel as if there's not really enough talk about this whole anti-trans or anti-LGBTQ network that is behind everything terrible that's happening for trans young people lately. I feel like at most we acknowledge the Cass Review and we try to give it a quick debunking. I don't think we really need to debunk the Cass Review. I think that some very qualified people have done that and are doing that as we speak. And it's incredibly involved, the Cass Review. It's 400 pages long. It takes hours to do an effective debunking. What I think we should focus on, or what I focus on, is trying to point out to people that this is very much the situation we had with the climate crisis a few years ago when Greta Thunberg became a big thing and the right started panicking. And suddenly all of these supposedly scientific organizations emerged. It was the same thing, an astroturfing attempt to make it look like people opposed to climate science were legitimate voices to listen to. But basically it was 97% of climate scientists on the one hand and 3% of weirdos on the other. We are in that situation now. SEGM are the 3%, SEGM and the anti-trans network. The rest of the medical profession, all of the peak medical bodies are on our side. I think the narrative doesn't make sense unless we let the normies know what's going on here, that there is a concerted effort, possibly funded by the religious right. We can't prove that. to shut down gender-affirming medical care for young people and ultimately for all of us.
No, we can't have that. Oh, wait, hold on. Forgot to push the button. No, we can't have that. No, we can't. And I appreciate you doing all the work that you do to, at least demystify some of where this stuff is coming from.
I tried to. I was on the ABC, interviewed on the ABC recently, and I went deep into this stuff, but in the end they just took a soundbite that had nothing to do with this. And that was fine. The soundbite was a good soundbite. But it's very hard to get people to listen to this stuff. And it's hard to not sound like a conspiracy theorist if you don't give them all of the evidence.
And when we were conducting interviews and stuff with some of those parents, especially when the change of those laws came through earlier in the year for accessing medical care under 18, one of the parents that I was talking to, this mother was saying to me, he's like, I've never been political in my entire life, but now I am, and I've been at more rallies I've been in 2 weeks than I have at any other time in my life. And that's because, just like every other kind of politics, everything is political, people. Everything is political, and the only times you have the luxury, the privilege of saying I'm not political is because the politics serves you. And it will come for you. Don't think that you are like some kind of exception to that rule. One day you'll age, and ageism will affect you, because don't worry, that's coming for all of us as well. Everything is political, friends. Everything is political. You're listening to Tranzmission. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with more. Don't forget to subscribe to the station, 4ZZZ.org.au to support, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Tranzmission. See you next Tuesday, 9 to 10 a.m. on 4ZZZ.